Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us today on this executive virtual boardroom. My name is Akinola from the DigiConnect team, and we are excited to have you all take the time to participate at this forum. Today, we will be discussing the theme cybersecurity in the new normal. This is trying to highlight some of the dynamics that have happened since the pandemic. And I think it's interesting to see what has been the different challenges for CISOs, information security executives, SOC leaders, and how different organizations have been managing the different threats and all of that. So today we have a very interesting session. But before I pass it on to the first speaker, I would like to just give some few housekeeping. Kindly note that for this call, everyone is muted because to avoid the background noises and for the sake of decorum. Also note that if you drop out of this call by any reason, you can join back using the same link and we will be able to admit you. Then lastly, note that we want you to participate. We have a presentation section. We also have an interactive session. I think the subject of security is something that should be a conversation. We would like you to participate and engage. And to do this, you have the option of using the chat box to type in your questions, as well as you have the option to also speak and participate in the conversation verbally. So what you need to do to speak verbally is to let us know you would like to speak, and we will be able to unmute you. What you need to do is to use the raise your hand feature, which is just below the screen on the panel where you have the attendees on the right side of your screen. If you click on the participant button, and then there will be a dot that will be under your name, we'll be able to recognize that you would like to speak. Otherwise, you could just type into the box and mention that I would like to say something. Please unmute me, and we will be happy to do that. Also, please, let's share our screen, our cameras, if it's possible, so that we can see our lovely faces. It's always good to have that connection when we see people. Without wasting much time, I would like to introduce our first speaker for today, and in the person of Jeremy Kaye. Jeremy is the head of Executive Briefing Center for Checkpoint Software Technologies. Jeremy leads the Executive Briefing Center C-level interactions. He's born in Manchester, England, and moved to London, where he developed a career in operational risk management process and technology within the financial services industry. Jeremy, over to you, and looking forward to your speech.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, and so wonderful to be partnering together with DigiNext. And we're really looking forward to being with so many of you today. I really consider myself the warm-up acts for Peter. But what I really hope is that we're going to be able to have an open conversation. I'm sure the last thing you guys want to do is to listen for an hour and a half. We want to talk with you. We want to hear your views. We really want to hear your opinions. So again, thank you very much. What we're going to do, we're going to start with a video. Just as a warning, in case the sound is a little bit too loud, get ready with your volume, just so you can turn that down a tiny bit. We don't want to shock you. It's a 1-minute video. Let me start with that. Okay, we ready? Here we go. Okay, Thank you. Thanks for listening to that. I just want to share with you a couple of personal stories. And I've got the first one. It's not about FC Barcelona, but it is about the city of Barcelona. I thought it'd be quite amusing. It's a little surprise for Peter because this story is actually, it connects us very, very well. It's happened quite a few years ago when I just started working at Checkpoint. And we'd gone out after one of our Checkpoint experience, one of our CPX annual events in Barcelona. And we went out for the evening, and we were in some place. We'd gone out to a restaurant, a few different restaurants. And at the end of the evening, I went back home to my hotel room, and I realized that my mobile phone, my work device, was no longer with me. And I went back and I was trying to trace my movements, and it turned out that when I came out of a club, we were approached by some people. I don't even know if Peter remembers this story, but we were approached by some people, and the bouncers of the club came up and they pushed these people away. And what it turned out is that the people that were the bouncers, they weren't really bouncers, they were part of the scam. And whilst they were pushing those people away, one of them was taking my mobile phone from my pocket. Personal story. It turned out that you know, they'd been running up calls on my phone, which unfortunately we had to cover the cost of. It's an interesting story, of course, because sometimes the protections that we think we're putting in, i.e. the bouncers that we think are there to protect us, can also be part of the problem. And I think it's important that although we're going to talk about security from a corporate perspective, there's always a personal dimension, a personal angle. Second story on the right-hand side is about emails. So I got an email from I got a phone call from my father, and he was asking me, Jeremy, why are you trying to sell me an Xbox? And I said, I've got no idea what you're talking about. I'm not trying, you know, what are you talking about? I said, I just got an email from you, from your Gmail, that you're sending me an Xbox offer. So I go to my Gmail, go to my sent items. There's nothing there. I've got no idea what he's talking about. He sends me them and I can see it's from him. Then I get a call from a friend. He says, Jeremy, why are you trying to sell me an Xbox? And now I'm realizing something's going on. And I'm going my sent items. There's nothing in my sent items from my Gmail. I don't understand how this is happening. What it turned out very cleverly is that someone managed to hack into my Gmail account, and they'd activated my out of office on my Gmail. And they'd put in this message. So anytime someone was sending me an email, they were getting back an automated email from me. Very, very clever. That was on my Gmail. There's always a personal dimension. And I want us to think about that as we go through and listen to what Peter's going to be talking about. Another thing, one of the main themes we're going to talk about today is around digital transformation, which we're sure has been a major project for you. It may well have been a project that was always on your agenda. Even at, you know, as you were ending 2019, it may have been something that was sped up as a result of COVID-19, and we're going to talk about that. So I think this cartoon accurately reflects how many of us have had to operate during the pandemic. As the video showed you, in case you don't know who Checkpoint is, we really are the largest global cybersecurity company, dedicated cybersecurity company in the world. We've got over 100,000 customers. We operate pretty much everywhere. We aren't a new company. What's amazing about Checkpoint is we've been around for over 25 years, and we're always in the leader and the visionary area where we're trying to bring the latest and most innovative technology to you to help you manage the security of your businesses. We're publicly traded. We've got now, as the video said, we're 5,300 employees worldwide. I won't talk more about Checkpoint. We'll leave that for Peter at the end of his presentation when we get through to some of the technologies. But let me just share with you the 3 sections of the presentation that we're going to get through today. So number 1, we're going to start off with new threats. What actually are we seeing in the world, both in the GCC countries and specifically in the government sector? That's going to be a very, very interesting topic. That's section number 1. Number 2, we're going to talk about how COVID or the impact of COVID has influenced our business operations. And we want to explore with you how, when our business changes, how security needs to align itself and modify itself to those business changes that we've seen. Finally, we want to ask that big question: can technology help us? We're a security technology company, so of course we think that it can, but if it can help us, how can it help us? Okay, so that's just by way of introduction. Like I said, I'm the warm-up act for our main speaker. Peter's been with Checkpoint for many, many years. He can introduce himself. He's our EMEA, Europe, Middle East and Africa Security Director and Checkpoint Security Evangelist. It's going to be really, really interesting. Like Akinola said at the beginning, we want this to truly be an interactive conversation. Yes, there'll be some slides and Peter will be talking. Send in your questions. If you want to talk live, let us know that you want to do that. We've got some polls that we're going to do at the end of each section as well. Without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Peter to continue. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jeremy. That's setting the stage quite a bit right there. Here we go, presenter modes. So first of all, yes, I do very much remember that Barcelona story. I remember you finding out and getting into a panic and us discussing why they didn't take my phone. That's because the lady who tried to slip her hand into my pocket, I almost broke her wrist when I found out that she was trying to get into it, and there was actually nothing there. So it's scary stuff, because we get to depend on security, and then just to find out that sometimes the world around us is slightly different than what we anticipated on. And I believe today we can also speak about the parallel in that, in the actual virtual and digital world, as effectively, we get to trust in controls, and we get to trust in functionality to find out that security should have played an element in it, or has played an element and kept us in business. And quite often that is misexplained by what they call FUD in the market, so fear, uncertainty, and doubt, where people try to scare you into buying something. And what I've learned in my over 20 years in Checkpoint now is that hardly ever works. And if it works, it certainly is not for the long term. However, there is, on the flip side of that, a large importance of keeping people informed and keeping them abreast on what's changing and what's happening. And what we will see throughout this morning, and I appreciate for some of it, it's going to be lunchtime. It's still dark outside here for me, back in the Netherlands where I live. Is that sometimes we take our best practices and we form them based on what we experienced in the past. And that's where we think we're good. And we build these blueprints and white papers, and we continue building as we built in the past. To find out that the world around us has changed and new attack vectors have been introduced. So I'm hoping I can talk to you a little bit about that today. One of the things we're going to leverage here is because a large portion of the audience is from UAE. We created a dedicated threat intelligence report. So one of the things that Checkpoint does, and I think a very large value of a security organization like Checkpoint is the ability to find out what's going on in the market sooner than anybody else. And at the same time, also be able to translate it into actionable security information. So threat intelligence is how we call it in Checkpoint, that can be applied at the right point where it would need to be enforced. I'll get back to what exactly that means and why it's not simply, as we sometimes think, a firewall. These reports can be created, and I want to highlight that these reports can be created by our local sales teams for any single country. So we looked at this because we have a decent amount of information, so the percentages I'm about to present you make sense. In some other countries, we've been doing this for a longer time. So then, as you know, with data, it finally stables out and it settles, and we have a trend as well. This is an area in GCC where we had the most information about. So it's something we can extend on. If we look at this, we see that the average organization is attacked about 247 times a week. Does that mean that people are continuously trying to attack you, and do they know who you are? Not so much. What's the case in the market is that a lot of what they call attacks are probes that are completely and fully automated. There's no single human behind it. That means nobody knows where they're sending the traffic. Nobody knows where the attack is being sent. They're just knocking on the door. They're trying to find out, is there something here that I can get? So why would somebody knock on my door if I am a local, in-country, maybe not so internationally important organization? Anybody out there is interesting. If you have data, I can get money out of it because I can hold it ransom and I can extort you for getting it back. If you have compute, I can leverage your compute by running Bitcoin miners or distributing malware. Anything that an IT organization has in the end is interesting, and this is what we've seen. We've seen that in the top malware list, as we looked at it, we've seen variations of Trojans, backdoors, but don't forget about mobile devices. We all, and Jeremy referenced to it, we all keep these devices in our pocket, very close to our body, and we almost look at them as an extension of what we do. Just look at a group of young people when they have nothing to do for 10 seconds and give me one that isn't looking at their phone. So it's become such an ingrained element of everything we do in our lives that people, when they were sent back home due to COVID-19, also started demanding to get their email on the phone. So the vast majority of any people out there are running email on their phones, and guess what? Malicious files, and you can see here in UAE, it's 93% of malicious files are being delivered over email. Does that mean that every single malicious file that gets delivered to a mobile operating system can indeed also be exploited? Not necessarily. It might be a Windows-oriented infection or malware, and that's not something that, as you might know, that can be executed on an Android or an iOS device. But they don't care. They are shooting with hail and they're looking what they will hit. So if they miss 10, they're going to get number 11. And with that, we see that the most common vulnerability is what's called remote code execution. This is immediately kind of a scary one, in a sense that if you get to execute code on any operating system, whether it's a client or a server, it basically means that if you can acquire the rights, you can do whatever you want to do. And a prime example that we've seen in the market that's popped up over the weekend was the exploitation of SolarWinds. So SolarWinds is a network monitoring platform. It started off being based primarily on SNMP. And in order to correctly monitor networks, people fed those SolarWinds systems with the credentials to do their jobs. So if you want to get very kernel-related data, you probably need to be close to an administrator or a root password in order to find out what's going on. So since these systems are supposed to be out of band, that was still okay-ish. And effectively what happened is it was very hard to attack these platforms from remote. What the attackers have done is they found a way into the SolarWinds organization. And since software today is based on multiple modules, they effectively infected one of the modules to create a backdoor of sorts. And the backdoor then, rather than trying to probe into an organization, started calling back home, but in a very intelligent way. It waited for at least 14 days to not raise any suspicion, because the infection was delivered through an actual SolarWinds update. SolarWinds as an organization signed the software and said, this can be trusted because you trust us. So this is what they call a chain attack, a delivery chain attack, which is pretty rare in the market, but it does show that vulnerabilities can come from many, many directions. You can see here, crypto miners are present in UAE, a bit less than global, but this may be due to the small set of data that we were able to use. What are people looking for? Multiple reasons. I'm not going to take you through all of the text here, but I mentioned ransomware. Ransomware is very annoying, but it can also put a business out of business. So if all of your data has just been encrypted and there's no way for you to get to it, and you are depending on the data to be available, the data could be email, it could be data that you need to run your business processes, then effectively that's it. the attackers, or the almost the cyber terrorists, if you like, they will tell you, pay me Bitcoin and you'll get your data back. If you're lucky, you are. If you refuse, they will tell you, I will publish all of your data publicly, and it'll be online, and it will be a public disgrace. So they then try to do it again. Sometimes they do both. Sometimes they will encrypt your data, and they afterwards will post it online just to double shame you. Practices are double in the sense that people have different opinions around should you pay or should you not. Our experiences has been that hardly ever you actually get your data back. So it is much more important to talk to your IT integrator or a cybersecurity company like Check Point to talk about what are the risks and how can I mitigate and prevent the risks from happening. Some of the other things that we see happening is cyber warfare. Here's another example. A very well-respected colleague in the cybersecurity market, FireEye, was also attacked by a nation state. Suspicion is it's coming from the east, and it's cold there at the moment. What happened is they also found their way into the organization, and since they do proactive pen testing, they basically have attack technology to check, is an organization vulnerable, yes or no? And those tooling, that tooling was extorted or extracted and subsequently abused in order to look at, in this case, we have evidence of national governmental bodies in the United States to leech on actual email conversations. So they were not looking to extort. They were not looking to start coining for Bitcoins or mining for Bitcoins. They were effectively looking for more information, because information today is data. And if you know how people are organized, and if you know how people are communicating, this is a great leverage into getting an angle or getting an advantage. I mentioned mobile, lots of people are working there. Mobile device management is great. It keeps your mobile device up to speed. It doesn't provide you security, regardless of what a mobile device management vendor says. Ask any of your mobile device management vendors today what they do to monitor the behavior of apps that are on your mobile phone, and they will look at you with a blank face, because this is where security is much more oriented than on an actual operating system such as Linux or Windows. Mobile devices are quite controlled in the sense that you don't get a lot of access to the operating system, but at the same time, it gives us new attack vectors, which is inserting the attack into the application itself. And don't be mistaken, they are distributed through the Apple Store. They are distributed through Google's Play Store. They are real threats that happen, and they get found every single week. We'll talk about cloud. We'll talk about the pandemic cyber landscape. Cloud today is probably what keeps me busy 3 to 4 days a week. Conversations I have with everybody are around cloud and cloud technology. So whether this is in a private network, people inserting cloud-based technologies, which is a real thing, and it's not the first connection that people make when they think about it, or the more obvious, I want to go into Microsoft Azure because they're pushing me and they give me credit, and this is where the whole market is going, and Gartner and IDC told me this is where I need to be. I need to investigate, and the push comes down from above. A lot of organizations are into the cloud. As part of my organization, we got about 300 SEs, security or sales engineers across EMEA. We've been running an overlay team for 5 years. We've made all the mistakes that you can make, just like anybody who enters the cloud for the first time will make. They will recreate networks in the cloud. They will try to insert firewalls or threat prevention devices as we did it in the past, just to find out that this world is quite a bit different. It's not a bad thing per se to go through that transformation, because sometimes this is what you need to find out what it's all about and to build your own intelligence. If you want to accelerate that process, tap into the resources that we have to offer to you, because we've got quite a bit of things to share with you that will expedite that journey for you. If we look at the malware, I'll leave this for you guys to read at leisure. Basically, it is not very challenging. It is mobile banking. It is trying to get premium services. It is info stealing. It is adware. It is not very sophisticated from a threat perspective, but it's annoying, it'll cost you money, and it may disrupt your business. That's the primary thing that we see happening quite a bit. What's interesting was, based on the set of data that we could use here, is to see the delivery vehicle for malicious files. So how do malicious files finally end up in your area? And we see that in UAE, it is much more email oriented than it is on the global data set we have. We discussed it a little bit in the run up to this building this presentation for you. We figure that the reality is probably a little bit more that UAE will be focusing towards global, because you run your organizations very much like the rest of the world. It's not like the rest of the world doesn't use proxy servers. You guys use Office 365 like a lot of other customers are out there. And we see similar attack patterns, as long as they're not politically motivated. The attacks are very much the same, because attackers don't care about politics. They care about gain, financial and economic gain. They care about money effectively. When we look at the type of files, we also saw a differentiation. So it looks like generically, when we look at UAE, that PowerPoint is the main attack vector. So think about it, PowerPoint is a pretty powerful tool. You're looking at it right now. I can play movies. If Jeremy wanted to, he could have embedded the movie into the PowerPoint file. It's not a pun, because I know it gets way too big to send by email. At the same time, we also see Excel files. Remember, you get this Excel file that says options are not enabled, and to do something fancy, you need to press the yellow ribbon button. This is what plays on the human behavior. This is a great way to package attacks and to send it. If we compare it to global, we see PowerPoint doesn't play such a large role. So this is a big differentiator. There's a factor 10 here between UAE, the data set we used, and what we see globally. Globally, we see a lot more executable files, which makes sense. The challenge that we have is, how do you protect against that? So you can, of course, say, my policy is to not allow executables as an attachment to email. Makes a lot of sense to me. But they can be disguised, and we see there's a large need out there to detonate the files that are being sent over email. And it doesn't matter if you run your own Exchange server environment or if you run it in Office 365. In both environments, delivery over email is still a massive vehicle, and Excel is just our biggest and richest tool. What you can do with macros is unbelievable. It is really, really, from a techie perspective, really, really cool, as you could appreciate the technology that's behind it. From a protector and a security expert, it's like, Jesus, why do we even allow regular users to run macros in their machines? The exploits are pretty similar, actually. We see that remote code execution and information disclosure are prime. But I want to focus your attention as well to the authentication bypass, because authentication in today's world is all about identity. And as we move forward in this presentation, I will try to show to you that it is no longer about access control only. Access control is the very, very basis that you start from. But after that, what you really want to be looking at is, who are you? And on top of that, what are you allowed to do, provided you are actually in a state that we want to trust? So what is your compliancy level connected to it? We took it one level deeper. This is for the whole region. So this is not focused on UAE only. And we looked at government. And this is an interesting thing I get a question about a lot. So people ask me, okay, what are the source countries that are attacking me? And then, do you have tooling that can prevent any traffic from that area to go to me? Because you might be inclined to think that I don't deal with Russia. So what if I just block the whole of Russia and do it based on a geo IP location? I'm a bit not proud to see that my country is at number 3, but the reality for the Netherlands being there is we don't have a huge amount of hackers. We are 16.5 million people in a very, very tiny country, but we are sitting on top of the interconnect between Europe mainland and the Americas. We're sitting on top of the fiber that carries all of the traffic. Do you want to venture how many proxy servers are out there and what hackers are using today in order to launch their attack from? Nobody in their right mind is going to launch an attack from their own home computer or even their own home, because the IP address can be traced back to where they are. So what do? You use a proxy server, you use Tor, you use infrastructures like AWS or Azure, and guess where the big locations are and the big distribution points? They are in the United States and they are in the Netherlands. So with that, source of attack doesn't really mean a huge amount. We see that people tend to do the same thing, both users as well as attackers. So there is a trend to be recognized, and it's worth investigating. I would say the only one that really makes sense here could be Russia and China, as they don't have national infrastructures that provide or allow even to run those proxy services outside of the country. So they are very secluded. They do most of the work inside the country. So that could make some sense. But also Russia already started going cloud with their own version of Amazon called Yandex. They're all good platforms for us to sell security off of, so we know about that. Attack vectors for malicious files in government. You can see the shift is already going also over the single-digit percentage. Also, still a large majority for email versus web. So not a massive change here, but it does show you where a lot of your focus is supposed to be. So if you're thinking, I'm moving my Exchange server into Office 365, and Microsoft is going to take care of me, they're going to distribute your emails, all of them. What we found in most of our testing is once we connect our technology using API-based approaches that allows us to investigate the email before it's actually delivered into the inbox, and Microsoft is in front of us doing their scanning, they're fantastic in doing the anti-spam, and we don't want to be in that market because we don't think that's security. But once they've done all of that, we still have a double-digit percentage of email that we capture that contains vulnerabilities that are sent towards your users. Whether they are malicious links or malicious files, this is where we can shine. The beauty is you don't invest in any equipment that you own in doing that, because it's all being delivered to you as a service. So if that's your appetite, this is a really interesting market to look at. If we look at malicious files, Excel is king around governments. I'm not surprised. We're all data hungry. If I look at my own organization, at my level, it's more Excel than PowerPoint. Sometimes I think that's unfortunate, because PowerPoint is much more interesting visually to look at, and you can use pictures. Excel is just the corny data, but it is what we need to run our business. And attackers know the same thing. They know this is what you use. They have investigated your behavior and your patterns, and they will find out ways to deal with this. Over web, we see similar things. Almost 70% in your region, dear listeners, is executable files that are being downloaded over a web interface. This is something that you want to think about. How can it be that the majority of attacks sent to your users is actual executable content? And then the question we would have is, would they be allowed to enable it? What we saw in the SolarWinds attack is one of the primary vectors in making the attack successful was malconfigured Active Directories. So over-permissive profiles on users, over-permissive or absent global policies inside of the Active Directory, and people being allowed to ascertain much more information than they would ever be entitled to if you had a say in it. So these are really, really important things. Executables are your first way in. Remote code execution, once you get in there, you're king. This brings us to poll number 1, to stop my continuous flow of words in your direction. And we kindly found Jeremy ready to host that for us.
Yeah, that's right. We're ready with poll number 1. Thank you so much, Peter. And also get ready. If you have any questions you'd like to ask, feel free to let us know in the chat. Here is poll number 1. Thank you.
So maybe for the listeners here to explain, the threat intelligence report is a weekly report that is sent by our Checkpoint Research part of R&D, where they translate what they have found into actual readable content that informs you about the attacks that are current and some technical background if you're interested to explain what's going on, what can I do to protect myself. So if you're ever speaking to your CISO or your CIO or you're one yourself and you want to stay up to speed, this is a very good source, and it's not a huge email distribution. So it's once a week, it fits on one page, and it's a nicely formatted thing. It's one of the weeklies that I actually try to read whenever it comes in, because whenever I have conversations with people like yourselves, this can be top of mind. You have actually some real-time speaking stuff to talk about.
All right, thank you. I think we'll stop the, thank you for those of you that participated. I'm going to stop the polling, and I'm going to share the results. It'll be interesting. Okay. Just to be clear, do the results come up on the screen?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Wonderful. Okay. So what can we see? Firstly, interesting. Certainly, 72% of respondents have said that there've been more attacks and threats since the start of COVID, and 28% have said it's remained the same. So that's quite interesting. And importantly, which of the following represents the impact of COVID on your company's security team? So 20%, so 1/5 of the respondents have said a security team is pretty much back to the way it was before. The majority of respondents have said we're in a new normal that is different and won't go back. So it means changes that have been made is changed the security landscape forever. And also another quarter of respondents said things are different, but we do expect to go back to normal at some point. So that's also, that's very, very interesting. That's very, very interesting. All right, thank you. I think what we'll do, we'll take a pause. I suspect there may be some questions for Peter. You can either speak them, let me just stop showing those results. We can either do them verbally, just let us know if you want to speak, and Akinola, our friend at DigiConnect, will unmute you, or you can ask them in the chat. I see there's already one question. We hope that the weekly intelligence report is not an Excel or PowerPoint. That's a good question. And you'll be happy to hear it is not. It is not. It's in an HTML format. It's well protected. But,
it's a great remark, Jeremy, but it's also actually one of the protection vectors that Checkpoint can offer. So we have the ability in our threat emulation and what we call threat extraction technology to extract the data that's being sent and to write it back down into a format that cannot be exploited, such as PDF. So we can also, for instance, remove any active content from an Excel file to just send the flat text. So while it was a funny remark, it's also referring to an actual protection technique that we apply today.
Okay, I'm going to come up with a question that someone sent to me directly, Peter, and don't be annoyed by the question, but it's sometimes these things do get asked. They said that you mentioned FireEye earlier on that got impacted by SolarWinds. I mean, when the cybersecurity companies themselves are being attacked, is that game over? Is that, what essentially they're saying, what are we meant to do? We better be buying tools to protect ourselves, but when they get hacked, what does that mean for us?
So we discussed, should we talk about this, yes or no? Because we don't want to down talk on any of our colleagues in the market, and particularly when this happened to FireEye, this is one of the most mature attitudes I've ever seen of a company being attacked in the market. They were very transparent, they were open, they were sharing information. They actually shared the indicators of compromise with the market, with organizations such as yourselves, to allow us to protect against offensive use of the tooling that was stolen from FireEye. I think there's a saying in Dutch that says, the door squeaks at the carpenter's home. Maybe some of that was in place. I'm not authoritative to say whether that was the case, yes or no. I do believe that people with enough conviction and enough patience and enough money and time and dedication will find a way to get into organizations. And this is what happened to FireEye, because for people that maybe don't know and listening to this, FireEye acquired an organization called Mandiant, and Mandiant is the biggest defense consultative organization in the United States. So they consult with the Ministry of Defense, with the Department of Defense, with Homeland Security, and that obviously makes it a prime target in today's geopolitical landscape. With that, nation states, so the ones that are funded and with enough dedication to get in, will have a huge interest to do this. And we don't know all the details what happened to FireEye, because the Federal Bureau of Investigation is doing most of the research, and they will be tight-lipped until something comes out. I'm sure FireEye at some point will communicate and explain how they got in. I don't think it's game over, because it's not a binary approach. And effectively, there's a lot of tooling out there that makes people able to secure themselves better than anything else. And attackers are very much like people. They are looking for the low-hanging fruit. So if you make it easy for them to come in, they will come in. And our job is to make it as difficult as possible. And one of the most important things to think about is, should anybody get into my organization, what controls do I have to mitigate? And this is where the whole classic security design falls apart. So when I joined Checkpoint, we sold firewalls, and we said, this is where the good guys are, and they're in our LAN. And this is where the bad guys are, and they're in a wide area network that we started calling the internet. And if you're one of the good guys and you're on the inside, you're cool. There's nothing to worry about, and everything goes. And that concept no longer works. We need to bring it down. And I think later on in the presentation, we will talk about what we call zero trust network access, which is a concept that's being applied and more organizations are implementing. And in one line, it basically says, only allow people when they can strongly authenticate themselves. And once authenticated, only allow them to go where they really need to go. And effectively, one of the issues that happened most likely to FireEye was somewhere where people could get in, and after that, allow them to start doing lateral movement. So internal security, that's another way to call it, would have been key to prevent such an attack. If you look at Checkpoint, for instance, and that's easier for me to speak about than an organization like FireEye, any source code that Checkpoint has is not exposed in any way, shape, or form to an external network. This is one of the biggest issues we had in allowing people to work from home, because we said this is our intellectual property. If we, for some reason, would ever get attacked and somebody would get access to our network, it cannot be that they could ever extract any of the PI that we have. So in Checkpoint, these are galvanically separated networks. They're physically separate from the office network. So where you are sitting when you go to an office doesn't allow you to go into the research and development networks. Those are completely separated. That's very brutal if you think about it, because it's not very user-friendly. This is the option that we chose because we only have this. Checkpoint is only a security company. If we lose this credibility with our customers, that's it. Chapter 11, we can close shop. We can close the doors. Nobody will ever deal with us anymore. I'm not saying nobody could ever penetrate Checkpoint, but if they do, what we've done is we made a layered approach, preventing them to get to the actual intellectual property. So they could probably get to my laptop and find out some email about customers if they're really desperate to do so. But it's a design. It's not a single checkbox, basically. So okay. Not game over, but more work for us ahead.
All right, thank you. Pete, there are a couple of questions which I know you're going to be addressing in the content in your other slides. So one is around, total protection. How can we be sure we're protected by any type of intrusion? I know, Sheba's asked that question. You are going to be talking about that, and Bianca's also asked a question around cloud. cloud providers versus cloud security, aren't they mutually exclusive, which as we know they're not. And I know you're going to be talking about that as well when you get to that. But just because I know you've got a lot of content as well in the next section, I think what we'll do, with your permission, Sheba and Bianca, we're going to address both of those questions in the context of the slides that are coming up. And I'll make sure that Peter does answer them properly. Okay, so I'm looking after you guys, don't you worry. So Peter, let's continue on.
Yeah. So we asked questions like we asked in the poll to a number of customers. We asked them to prospects and we asked them to partners. We used an external organization and we said, okay, how is all of this for you? How does COVID-19 have an impact to you? What worked best for you, enabling people in the new normal? And in the future, what are your top concerns? So here's some of the answers. Similar to what you guys answered back, we see roughly a third says the impact is permanent. Back then, 63% thought that we'll return to normal life, but some aspects of the coronavirus, the impact of it will stay. I suspect as the lifetime of the virus is longer than any of us anticipated, this percentage may change quite a bit because we're starting to get used to this and we're seeing the benefits. So while it's a bit subjective, the some aspects part, I believe, is going to start growing, and some at some point will probably read more aspects as more and more of the way we do business is becoming accepted. For me, I'm responsible for EMEA. I used to be in an airplane every week, about 45 weeks a year. And in doing that, I was visiting customers, I was visiting our headquarters, I was visiting local subsidiaries. And I was just talking to my partner the other day. We're in the Netherlands, we're in a full lockdown. And they advised me until the middle of March, I should not plan any international travel. And I told her, I'm going to be working from home for a whole year by the time this is done. Hopefully this is done, because we don't know, of course. And I could never, ever in my life have imagined that ever since I started the EMEA team back in 2008, that this would ever happen to me. So, but customers are accepting it. My colleagues are accepting it. My partners are accepting it. So it seems to be becoming quite a bit of a normal. What we did see though, during COVID-19, is that the attack vectors changed. So initially, even back in January, when everything was happening in China, we saw that the spike of attacks were phishing attacks. They were trying to lure people into clicking on a link that says, here's everything you need to know about this new corona thing. 94%, as you can see, were related to the coronavirus. After that, people started realizing what it meant. We were all sent home. We had to start working from home. And effectively, the attack vectors shifted. And it said, hey, if you're being impacted by this virus, maybe you're unemployed. Maybe you've been furloughed. And the government is providing help for you. You can get compensated for the fact that you no longer have an income. So guess what? Another human trigger that we found to say, hey, come to me and I will help you. They will actually help you, but in the wrong way. And finally, once it started progressing even more, we started talking about solutions. And we said, maybe you've been contaminated. And then in doing that, you want to share that with other people, because don't you want to prevent other people from getting what you got? And this again is playing on the human mind. And in doing that, they now got an ability to get you to install an app on your mobile device. And that's cool, because then you basically get access to just about everything. And don't forget, your administration, your IT administration has a lot less control over your mobile phone than they ever did over your laptop or your desktop. So for an attacker, this is a great place to be, because it's much easier to hide. Plus, you're always with the user. People will walk away from their desktop or their laptop. If they go to the toilet, they will take their phone, right? All of you are smiling now, I'm sure. I don't see all the faces, but this is what happens. So when we look at how this is being impacted, the first thing is people were sent to go home. Don't come in the office. We don't know what's going to happen. Everybody's going to die. So don't come in, and make sure you go and get connected from home. I've literally seen people driving their car to the office, taking a desktop and a display and a keyboard and a mouse, putting it in their car, driving home, setting up the computers at home because they didn't have laptops, and then finding a way to connect back into home. Everything was used. Any vendor out there was offering 30, 60, 90-day free software to connect back. People said set up RDP servers. People tried to figure out doing things over Zoom, over WebEx, whatever, Teams, whatever came in. And slowly it started becoming a little bit more professional, and we started using collaboration tools. And we also allowed people to work from mobile devices. In many organizations, this was simply not allowed. Because it happened, organizations that were a little bit more forward-leaning said, you know what, if we're going to do this, we might as well roll out the migration and the transition from running a classic application server on premises and start stuffing it into the cloud. Azure is here. They said they can do it cheaper. They will help us out because everybody was out there helping each other. So we said, next to the fact that we need to open up our networks, we now have an email flow that is going from people sitting at home, connecting into Office 365 where they get their email, but at the same time, they have a VPN tunnel back into the network where we have applications that we could not digitally transform. We see that not only did it happen, it also happened very, very fast. And everybody got into a mindset that said, don't complain, just go ahead and do it. So effectively what happened is the perimeter that we were so used to and so comfortable with that said, here's the boundary of my IT network, and the outside is insecure and the inside is secure, all of a sudden everything became a perimeter. If you think about it, every mobile device that you have, whether it's a laptop, a desktop, or a mobile device, now calls back home, and effectively they are communicating through you to a tunnel, and they are trusted to some level. So effectively, you just poked holes into your traditional perimeter and extended that all the way to all of those users. Since those users are now also talking to a cloud environment, our network has become the internet, and we're trying to invert those perimeters and bring it back home. Combined with get it done, I don't care how, people started cutting corners. We've seen that. It was very much about connectivity, not necessarily about making a secure business continuity environment. And this is where it finally should all be about. So this is where we have some concerns. Also because, and the question was already out there, Jeremy, what about cloud-based technologies? I'll tell you right now, cloud vendors will speak to you about a shared responsibility model. They should really be speaking about a split responsibility model. They will make sure the cloud is there for you to consume. Whatever you put on top of it is your responsibility and your responsibility only. Don't be fooled by hearing shared and thinking they're going to take part of that responsibility. They're not. If you lose data in Azure, that's your problem. Microsoft is not going to pay you back. They're not going to recuperate it for you. They are going to make sure that the cloud is there and you can always run it. It's a better data center you could ever hoped for. But the split is between the networking and the resources on one hand, which is their responsibility, and the application and the data and the authorization, which is your responsibility alone. So I'm advocating for the term split responsibility, but it doesn't sound so nice if you're a marketeer working for Microsoft. So that's where we are, but this is our reality, guys. So what has been more prominent? So what have we seen? First of all, on IT assets, the big thing was people needed to move the workforce. Everybody had to start working from home one way or another. That led to a large acceleration of digital technology projects. I cannot imagine having spent so much time on any web conferencing tool and looking at myself since I was 18, because whenever I do these Zoom sessions, I'm looking at myself. It's like looking in the mirror all day long. You know, I feel like an adolescent again, trying to figure out, do I look good or not? It's a little bit like the doggy on the right-hand side that you can see. And one of the other things that is very much a non-IT topic, but very much out there, is the shift to what's called customer empathy. We now make it an ingrained element of our conversations to ask, how are you? How's Corona infecting you? Is there something that I can help you with? Can I help you move forward? So we've become a little bit more on the customer empathy side. This is a fantastic angle for attackers. If I can play on the empathy part, if I can say, oh, I can help this person. What if Jeremy's email had said, hey, Dad, can you help me sell my Xbox? His dad probably would have said, yeah, sure, I'll help you out. Click the link, please, because it will help me promote my sale on the online platform. His dad wouldn't have thought twice. Like Jeremy asking me to click the link, he would have clicked the link. Off you go. I like helping people. So this is one of the new vectors that we have potentially not thought about. Then we started looking as well, how does this relate to business continuity? So what is it that we need in order to keep things running? So C-level people, the CISOs out there, the IT administrators, the IT leaders said, we need to make sure that people can do what they need to do. I think the laptop vendors have had a great year. We also then saw an increase of collaboration tools. Zoom skyrocketed as an organization. I think their stock grew with hundreds of percents. That's a few factors, right? The people that owned stock before all of this happened, they are probably now very, very rich people if they decided to sell. But effectively, we do this, right? We start collaborating over video and we have this audio. I invested in my home in a high density camera. I have a semi-professional microphone that I'm using to speak to you. In the back of my display, I now actually have a studio quality ring of light, making sure that I look fine on the picture. I would have never have considered this a year ago. You know, I wouldn't have thought about it at all. Obviously, things got accelerated. So rather than slowing down, despite the fact people were not on premises, we still saw that IT projects were delivered in time. People were going to the cloud because in the cloud, we agree that we cannot be on premises. Therefore, this is a normal methodology, a normal way of working. How do we see then the concerned level? So how does this going forward? The top future cybersecurity related concerns obviously are increases in cyber attacks. This is what's happening. If things are getting more remote from you, you will have less physical control, and in your mind, it will do something to you. A new attack factor is attacks on unmanaged home PCs, because even if the PC in the home has some security technology on it, the usage of the device is not exclusive to your employee. Probably their children are using it as well to do the home shopping and to get home deliveries. Breaches can now happen because you have to open up and you have to allow those untrusted, semi-untrusted sources to come back into your networks. So these are interesting threats that we didn't have to think about so much in the past. In tightening security, we feel that solutions that are out there should really be very much about thinking on prevention. And this is something that is in the DNA for Checkpoint. We feel that when you look at all of this, you need to find a way that allows you to prevent the attacks from happening into your networks. And it requires thinking in advance. So it basically requires you to think, what could happen and what can I do to make sure that it doesn't? And then put yourself into a position that allows you to have the controls to deal with this. So on many networks, we see a focus to drive on tightening network security. Introduction of 5G, if you think about it, today, on average, we've got like 5 devices connected to our name. Prediction is in 3 years from now, 3 to 5 years from now, you will have 50 devices connected to your name. Think about today, you got your laptop or your mobile phone or your tablet and things like that. In a few years from now, there's going to be smart light bulbs, there's going to be IP cameras, there's going to be sensors monitoring the climate. If you're in a industry environment, think about the fact that since you can't go on the plant anymore, and it's unlikely we'll continue doing this because we've proven we can do it from remote and it's more efficient, business processes are going to say, you know what, you monitor the energy plant or the sewage plant or the water conditioning plant from remote. The sensors are providing data. Why not export the data into a cloud-based environment and you manage it from the cloud-based environment? Super interesting, super scary as well if you don't also implement the security into this. And one of the things that is key here is to, once you start designing this, start inserting the security element and not do it as an aftermath. If we got to think about the fact that we're managing business processes rather than anything else. And managing a business process means managing risk. Managing risks means building insecurities. It's simple as that when I explain it like this. The reality is quite often we see people are focused on getting stuff to work. And this is the scary part where we really want to think about doing that in a different way. So the new normal, I'm not sure it's going to happen. The pandemic will likely disappear. The cyber effects, I'm pretty sure, are going to stay with us. So what are we going to be doing in that process? Well, one of the things that will not be stopped is the cloud adoption. We see an explosion of cloud usage around us. We see a huge amount of shortage on knowledge in that market space, both on a knowledge level of building clouds, as well as securing the clouds, as well as the business model around dealing with cloud, because you're free to buy compute anywhere you want. It's a worldwide global vendor. You're no longer bound to local companies. You could get consultancy from the United States as well as you could get it from any local countries. Nothing much changes, and effectively you see this is what's happening. If you decide to build it in-house, your developers are going to be using lots of projects they will find in open source, and they will reuse GitHub models that are posted by somebody else that you don't know, that you didn't verify. You don't have the time to run security execution on. And effectively, this is, if you think about it, the way that SolarWinds got infected. SolarWinds got infected because somebody managed to put a backdoor into one of the modules for SolarWinds. SolarWinds signed it as official software and sent it as a trusted update. But they were not the first to be attacked like this. If you remember, there was a big issue with in the Ukraine, where they had financial software that was infected in the very same way. So they are leveraging trust that apparently is out there. That may not necessarily be so. So what Checkpoint has done is we brought together all of the security around cloud. We call it a family that's called Cloud Guard. So any virtualization technology that we protect, remember we are Checkpoint software technology, so we've been doing this for a while. It doesn't have to be hardware. Anything that is virtualized that we need to protect is covered in Cloud Guard. So whether you are going to a public cloud, whether you are implementing Cisco ACI or OpenStack or any other VMware ESX type of technologies, we can sit right in there and help you secure that. We can do the same thing for remote access. And once we start scaling this, we see that the need for internal security in networks really starts branching out. So what we've done with the Quantum series, which is our hardware line, we also introduced a concept that allows appliances to be implemented in a cloudy way. What do I mean with that? I mean, we can actually introduce a setup that says, okay, you need X amount of gigabits of security right now. We can do that. We can dynamically add additional compute like you would do in the cloud, like a load balancing environment in the cloud. We can start adding security appliances and still make it appear like one to your network. So as you're growing in your needs and appetite for security, we can actually satisfy that without introducing additional complexity. I spoke a bit about IoT. I predict this is going to be one of our biggest topics in the upcoming years. Anything that you have that has an IP stack will communicate. And just ask yourself the question, if you're listening to me now, are your video cameras in your buildings running on a separate network? And if they are you sure? And if they're not, who actually hung those cameras? Who connected them? Are they connected to the same Wi-Fi as your users are on? This is a fantastic attack vector because nobody checked the security level of those cameras, did they? And they all come from the Far East in most of the manufacturing plants. So lots of things are happening right here. What Checkpoint does is we have a model called, and the model is called, is an architecture, and the architecture is called Infinity. And with that, we interweave all of the security layers together and set you up in a driver's seat, allowing you to deal with what's going on. How do we drive that in an industry where we need to branch out? Because if you listen to me, more and more the security topic has drifted away from being an IT conversation into a business conversation. I spoke to you about securing business processes. I spoke to you about keeping your business in business. As an element of that, we also participate in the World Economic Forum. And in there, when we were speaking to the specialists, we said, you know what, this whole COVID-19 situation is obviously a pandemic, but we believe at the same time what we're experiencing is what's called a global reconnected here.
All right, you got us worried there. We thought you'd been hacked.
No, no, that's not it.
Okay.
You can still hear me, can you?
Yes. Yeah.
Just let me apologize. Let me re-enable my video in a second. In the pandemic, what we see, biological versus cyber, is a few analogies. If you look on the left-hand side, you can see biological pandemics. And in there, what happened is people got infected. And with Corona, the infection factor is 2.5, compared to Zika, which, if you recall, the mosquito-carrying virus, which at the maximum 6.6, and measles back in the day before we had vaccination was 11 to 18. Compared it on the right-hand side, you can see cyber attacks are at a factor 27. So the amount of attacks that we see is a few factors larger than anything else out there in the biological world. What have we started doing as a society and as an organization? Well, one of the things that we did is figure out where all of this goes. So imagine you're going to a store. In the store, when you go there, before you get in, they require you to wear a face mask. At least that's what's happening in many of the countries today. Before you're allowed to get in, you need to sanitize your hands with a disinfectant. And once you go in, you still keep your distance. You still keep 6 feet distance from the next person next to you. That's because we have to assume we can't trust anybody. Bring that to computer and IT networks. Guess what happens? We need to isolate network segments from each other. Ideally, isolate every single compute element within the network from each other. And once we allow people to get in, because we have authenticated you have a valid reason to be here, we then also need to say you can only go where you need to go. So even if I allow you into the shop, this is what's happening to me at the moment, even if I go into a hybrid store that sells foods and non-foods, I'm only allowed to buy the foods because we need to limit the amount of movements within the store. The same thing is what we're starting to doing in IT networks. We are going to limit the amount of movements of people getting into networks. And once they get in, we want to make sure that they are compliant. So are you running the correct software? Are you in the right state? Are you basically wearing your face mask and need to sanitize your hands? And once you get in, you need to follow the direction that we give you, and you only get to use the application. Nothing else in the network, no lateral movements, because that's not an okay thing to do. So we need to start building that. Because this is a change of behavior for many people. We need to start building the fact that you need to think before you click. We need to start making more and more sure that people are actually compliant and they have the patches installed. Assuming that you have an automatic install of Windows updates doesn't work that well anymore if people are working from home, because how do I know the Active Directory is still in place? So lots of things that are happening out there. Very interesting parallel between the two. And it brings us to our poll. And I think, Jeremy, you got a little bit more to say about our integration with the World Economic Forum as well.
Yeah, so it is a good opportunity. I've recently been asked by Checkpoint to manage our relationships with the World Economic Forum. We've been a partner with the WEF for over a year now. We collaborate with them on 3 panels, 3 forums they call them. One is cybersecurity, of course. One is data privacy, and one is IoT and the future of urbanization. So it's a great partnership, and we're really looking to collaborate further with them. We've got lots of things that are going to be coming out. I think what we'll do the next poll. We do, just giving everyone a warning, we've got 20 minutes left. We've got the final section coming up with Peter, who's going to talk about some of our technology solutions. We've had some very interesting questions that I am going to be pinning Peter up against the wall and getting him to answer. So get ready, Peter. If you want to just familiarize yourself during the poll with those questions, you can get yourself ready. Okay, here is poll 2. If I could ask as many people as possible to try and answer these questions, that would be super helpful. Okay, and here we go. In fact, Peter, we can use this downtime whilst people are filling this out to take a look at some of these. So one person, Dana Sekaran, has asked 2 questions. I'll ask the second one first, because you were talking about before minimizing ACL inconsistency in the firewall. Is there any like special algorithm that Checkpoint uses? How do we manage that?
Sorry, minimizing what?
The ACL inconsistency in the firewall.
So access control lists.
Yes.
Oh, so this is what we talked about, right? The basis of doing security is access control. One of the things that Checkpoint does is allows, contrary to per device based management, for users to sit in a driver's seat and to have a centralized management. Centralized management allowing us to create a consistency across gateways that translates how you feel about security, how your security policy can be visualized and be distributed across enforcement points. Now, we don't limit ourselves to enforcement points like firewalls. We also do that towards applications. We do it across multiple threat prevention technologies, but also around endpoints. So the centralized management is one of the key unique selling points that Checkpoint has been offering since its inception, where we basically remove the ability to be inconsistent, but at the same time offer a level of dynamism to allow for enforcing the policy relative to the point where it's being executed. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a strong answer. We also had another question around, and I'll just read it out. What would be your suggestion to have security solutions for multi-vendor in one? Is it recommended?
So one of the drivers that we have been talking to customers about, and one of the pitches we've been making, is a consolidation of security technologies. This is why we've become one of the largest security vendors out there in the market. And in the past, the approach was what was called best of breed. So people would buy the best antivirus from vendor A and the best firewall from vendor B and the best IPS solution from vendor C, and put it up in the network. What we found out over time is one, we don't have the time to do all of the integration work anymore ourselves. 2, we don't have the staff to deal with all of the complexity that all of these solutions introduce. And 3, the timing to respond to any event has become so much shorter than ever before, that even if you have all of the intelligence present in your local organization, it's really, really hard because those vendors, they don't really integrate together. So consolidation has been a big point where, and this is also where Checkpoint has been branching out to some organizations. We're still known as the firewall company, but we've more than 10 years ago already started shipping our IPS technologies. And today, we're bringing together additional technologies like anti-bot, anti-ransomware, URL filtering, a lot of network-oriented technologies. And our conversation with the customers is around, what do you really need rather than what's a collection of feature sets that all of separate vendors could potentially offer you. And let's make a comparison against, can you manage this and at what cost? In quite a large majority of the cases, what turns out is consolidation makes a lot of sense. So I hope I helped address that. Obviously, everybody's situation is specific, and we're very happy to have a conversation around that with you.
Okay, thank you. I mentioned before Sheba asked for best practices. I did share a few links, Sheba, in the chat. Peter, do you want to just address some? Yeah, and I think you have spoken about a few of these, which some basic cyber hygiene. And how does Checkpoint? How do we help provide that guidance and best practices? And I don't think you necessarily need to go through best practices per se. But perhaps if you could just talk about how we as a company address best practices and how we share that guidance with companies that work with us.
So it happens on multiple levels. One is we need to ensure that people are aware of our technology. In order to do that, we work with our local sales teams. So there's always local people to speak to. And on top of that, we always work with partners. So we educate our partners so they can also help you integrate. In case third-party technologies are involved, they know what to do. So there's the level of technology. Then we help explain how technology can be implemented, obviously by means of manuals, but much more important probably is very frequent webinars explaining what we do. And on top of that, I don't know if you shared the link, Jeremy, but we got a fantastic part of the Checkpoint website that has white papers on various approaches, so what we call use cases. We're basically saying, okay, you're going to go digital transformation in a public cloud and you're moving applications. What do you need to think about? What do you need to do? After that, what we want to make sure is that security can be managed in an easy fashion. So if security is hard to manage, people give up. It might be the best product in the world. If it's not easy to drive, and I always challenge people to compare a syslog to our Checkpoint logging and tell me which one they like best. And there's never been anybody who told me syslog, except the ones with square eyes and sandals with a white beard sitting behind their Unix machine. So anybody else basically said, give it to me in a consumable fashion to make contextualized information around security. Then obviously there's a need to know that the organization you're working with will not just be here today, but they will be here for a prolonged period of time. So what we also want to make sure is that we're a stable company. We've been in the Gartner Magic Quadrant for network security for a long time. We also had our software third-party tested. So an organization like NSS has been up till now the only kind of trustworthy organization that did third-party testing on security quality and said, how well can you respond to scenarios of attacks and attack scenarios and malware and things like that. We think it's very important to show a consistent behavior, to always be the recommended choice, because that means that our customers at whatever given point in time have the top-notch security, and not we invest it once to look really good and we market that fact, and after that we are mediocre. That's not an option that's on the table for us. Finally, of course, and maybe circling back here, is make sure to stay in continuous conversation with the sales teams. This landscape is changing and it's very dynamic. I invest a lot of time in my organization to make sure they're up to speed and trained on whatever is going on. We always try to be ahead of the curve, and I push my people to have proactive conversations about changing business models, changing approaches in our customers' environments, and assist on having a conversation. How can we apply security into that total orchestrated chain?
Okay, Peter, I'm sure there's more that you can share, but we've got 10 minutes left. I know you've got a few slides that we want to finish on, and then we've got a poll, and then we'll try and deal with some additional questions as well. So thank you. I'm going to stop sharing those results. And let's move on to the final point. If I just ask, try and take just 5 minutes on this next section, and then we can have 5 minutes for questions. I know that's challenging you.
Very much, isn't it? So one of the things that's key today more than ever is real-time prevention. So the ability to sit in the driver's seat, and this is a question I want to send everybody home with, that says, should something happen in my network, do I have any controls that allow me to act? We are actually one step further than that. What we're saying as an organization is we're setting you up in the driver's seat that prevents anything from happening. That means you don't have to do detection because it never happened. This is important. It's the patient zero. It's the 0-day approach. But then if you say, I want to know about it after it happened, and then I'll figure out what to do, you're late. You're very, very late. The first time anybody noticed anything in SolarWinds was over the weekend. They've been in there since the beginning of the year. That was pretty scary because you know how much data they exfiltrated. What's also important is I mentioned the consolidation and visibility, so I won't speak about that too long, but the ability to be swift and agile. So how quickly can you turn something around? How quickly can you deploy something? Checkpoint made sure that everything we do is API controlled. That means any part of the software can be configured from remote. You can do it in trusted scripting, you can do it with an orchestrator, and we can do that not just on a gateway device, we can do it around mobile devices, we can do it around endpoints, we can do it for IoT, and we can do it for cloud. So there's quite a widespread in doing that. We call that the Checkpoint Infinity architecture, a kind of reference to that. And this is more or less the picture where I plan to speak for another hour, as you know, it is so wide and there's so much to talk about. In the left bottom, we see where we traditionally came from. We had the computer networks. We talked about access control. Please don't stop there. If you're listening, don't ever allow anybody to say all we need to do is firewalling. If you're firewalling, you're just postponing to be invaded. In much more, we need to talk about introducing layers, about introducing segmentation, the ability to look inside of applications. If you're going cloud, remember, this is not just somebody else's computer. This is really where things are going to be done over the web. You're going to be looking at security posture, but maybe more importantly, on a human level, different people are building clouds than the people that build networks. They are not educated to think in a security design fashion. They have different tooling to their disposal. They don't like to work with traditional tools. And maybe sometime, one of the most recent innovations that we introduced is people don't even build an application anymore. They stick their code to a function in the cloud and they run it in a fashion that's called serverless. How do you secure an application that's serverless if all that's running there is code? On the right-hand side, we see the integration where Internet of Things is doing its introduction. That was the wrong button. Come on. Internet of Things is doing its introduction, but we also need to think about all of the remote access that we discussed, including the endpoints. So mobiles and endpoints are really an area that cannot be forgotten. The best way in a short single sentence to explain why we do this in such a good fashion is the middle part of the section here. So it's CPR is mentioned specifically, but in general, we have a massive cloud of information that we call threat cloud. This is where we gather all the threat intelligence we have. We apply technologies such as machine learning. We also acquire IOCs from, for instance, the FireEye example, but we also work with certs, and we got our own R&D department. Everybody in R&D has a responsibility to look out for security signals and to feed this environment. We both got dedicated people reverse engineering, as well as people as a part-time part of their job, an integral part of everybody's job, make sure that we find these IOCs and we feed it. All of that can be managed from a central location. This is what we call the consolidated threat management, which can be cloud-based, it can be on premises, we don't mind so much. Just a few areas. So how does everything come together? First of all, people are going to be working from home. I don't think that's going to change. They may be working from home less, and maybe the ratio between working from home and working on premises will normalize again. But effectively, this vector is going to continue to be there. People will be consuming data in data center and offices and on all of their devices. What we aim to do is to address all of that. So in the data center, you want to apply cloud technologies while leveraging the horsepower you need in order to get this done. In the cloud, you want to have similar technology, so a similar ability to address this, while at the same time also looking at the new attack vectors. One of the things I really shouldn't leave out here is what we call cloud security posture management, which is not something that we really saw in classic data center environments. The closest we would get is your legacy, Jeremy, is compliancy.
Yes,
So,
it is.
With cloud security posture management, what we do is we allow you to say the database, if it's erected in a cloud environment, should be encrypted. If not, it should not be able to communicate to the internet. We can provide people with the tooling to do that in a single line of command, and the command is not a syntax, it's user-friendly ways of doing this. We can also apply, I need to be GDPR compliant, look at this. And we can then do that for the full cloud environment. This will help you mitigate the challenges that those DevOps or DevSecOps people are introducing into your environment, because they're not network security people. And classic security change management will not work in cloudy environments. They will tell you, you are Mr. No, I don't like you, I will find a way to do it anyway. And they will work around you. This is where shadow IT enters. We spoke about IoT, Jeremy. We spoke about mobile and endpoint protection. I feel pretty secure, even on me as a paranoid security professional. I have had an app once on my phone that was doing stuff that it wasn't supposed to do. And our technology protected me from actually it being installed or executing, which gave me a super safe feeling. Also with the document protection technologies like threat emulation and threat extraction, I'm very comfortable downloading a file from a website because I know if it's malicious, Checkpoint technology is going to prevent it from actually being executed on my machine. It allowed me to really, really nicely do what I needed to do. One last thing on this slide I want to highlight, and you guys made me talk about so much, is SASE. It's a new development in the market, relatively new development in the market. It is the term that people connected to this inversion of the perimeter. The fact that people work from home, the fact that applications are no longer in your data center. SASE means Secure Access Service Edge. This is somewhere where we also invested. We acquired an organization allowing us to implement Zero Trust, allowing us to make sure that the users only connect to where they need to connect and do it in a secure fashion. Brings me to, in your 5-minute window, poll number 3.
All right, you're just in the 5-minute window. Let me just launch. You've spoken about so many things, Peter. I don't know how I've been in Checkpoint 9 years and I've learned a lot, so I can only imagine, for everyone here, whilst you're looking at that, this is just an opportunity for the things that Peter has spoken about. If you'd like us to speak with you about any of the topics or other things, please let us know. There's so many things that we've addressed, and our local teams that are covering all the GCC countries will be in touch with you, and we'll be able to at least try and help you out in these areas. So please feel free, let us know what it is that you'd like us to speak with you about. Whilst that's going on, there was one question. I think it's a super important question, is around patient zero. Mm-hmm. Okay, in particular, given the sort of the pandemic, the biological cyber pandemic, talking about patient zero. Patient zero in a biological thing, I think is almost impossible. Patient zero in a cyber thing is something potentially doable. I do want, before you answer, I do want to know, I'm conscious of the time. I'm conscious that we have run out of, that we have come to the end of our official allocated time slot. And I don't want to make anyone uncomfortable. So if people are okay with us just taking another few additional minutes to answer questions that come up, that's awesome. But of course, if you have to leave, no one should feel under any obligation to stay. And we really thank you for being with us. Thank you. So Peter, if you could just address patient zero.
Yeah, so you're right. In the biological world, it's really hard because we accept that all humans are unique and everybody shows its own behavior, and we don't feel we should implement controls over behavior as long as it fits into kind of a framework. It is much different when it comes down to applications and computers, because there we do have a very clear distinction as to what we would expect you to do and what we expect you to not do. One of the things that we implemented, which is sometimes hard for people to understand initially, is patient zero protection is about behavior, and it's not about knowing what's wrong. So classic security like antivirus and IPS is surrounding around signatures. So we know what's wrong and we can protect seeing that again. Much more challenging is the protection of patient zero, which is the behavior deviant, and does it deviate so much from what we would expect, and can we then nip it in the bud? Can we prevent it from becoming malicious in doing that? I think one of the strong points we have in Checkpoint is the fact that wherever this happens and we capture the behavior, we can immediately share that through Threat Cloud with all of the enforcement points worldwide. So the chances of you being patient zero are so much decreased, because the whole world of Checkpoint customers is participating in this analysis. And the second we find out, we tell everybody else this should not happen. So it's kind of a dual answer. One is behavior-based analysis that we do, specifically on mobile devices. This is actually an acquisition that we did. That's very cool technology, which would take me a long time to explain. And at the same time, we have built an infrastructure allowing us to prevent any further infections, because we have this ability to share the threat intelligence.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other additional questions you'd like to share? I'll just leave that open for a minute.
Yeah, I guess one of the questions was sharing the presentation, which we will obviously do.
Yes.
Were you planning to share the results on the poll?
Not for that one. Not for that one. We do have a question, since we're all there's questions coming in now. People wait to the last minute and then they come. It's like waiting for a bus. Since we're all looking for optimal remote workforce solution, is SASE a VPN solution? That's question number one.
I think SASE has an element of VPN inside. It doesn't require it, because it all depends on your definition of VPN. Traditional VPN would be tunneling based. That's not required for SASE, because a lot of SASE is happening over HTTPS connections, and it can be completely clientless. So the part of the implementation, as Checkpoint has done it, is a completely clientless disclosure of applications to people that are acting from remote, by operating that from a cloud-based service. We will, however, also add tunneling-based technologies such as VPN, because in some cases that's the best thing to do. Not every application can be transported over a browser-based connectivity. So that's a yes and a no.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned about IoT. Does Checkpoint have real-life use cases?
Yeah, this is actually quite cool technology. If you're a security professional. So I got two examples of customers that I personally worked with. One of them is a metal manufacturing plant over in Germany, and they have these massive melting pots that they control from remote. You can imagine that temperature is quite of an important thing there. And people managed to get control of that from remote, and they started increasing the heat. And effectively that will lead to a point where the melting pot will malfunction and potentially explode. So that was caught just in time, because there was a secondary network monitoring all of the IoT signaling. If that wouldn't have happened, that would have been a bit of an issue. Second example is a manufacturer of foods and beverages worldwide, and I think chocolate as well. They have these manufacturing plants where they do a lot of OT elements. What they have done is they've implemented an assessment of whatever is in their network, and our technology complements the assessment with the threat intelligence information. So if we know what devices you have, and we know what the vulnerabilities potentially are that can be applied to them, and we know what behavior they typically display, we can predict an intelligent rule base to enforce whatever traffic should look like and prevent malicious stuff from happening. Maybe the final one is, I don't know if people monitor the news closely, but GE recently was in the news shipping MRI machines with a default username and password worldwide, the same thing. So whatever device was connected to the internet, and you can find them through databases such as Shodan, anybody could have logged on to those machines. So the medical world is massively a use case, especially in COVID-19 times, where people are connecting devices to networks they don't necessarily trust. This is different from what they did in the past. And they were not built for security. They were built to last for 20, 30, 50, 60 years, and they just sit there. They don't get updated. So these are massive areas of use case that we think are super, super important.
Thank you. Wasi has said here, you mentioned Maestro earlier. Can you just give some further words on how it's a hyperscale solution?
Yes, if you think about hyperscale, it's basically the ability to say, I only want to scale when required. So we got inspiration from public cloud environments. If you look at Azure or AWS, they will give you a load balancer for free. And then they built something that's called scale sets, which says, if the load hits 60%, add another machine to it. And then if it hits 60% again, add another machine to it again. And then you basically start scaling as required in a concept of paying as you go, which is interesting on a financial level. We built the same thing in a physical fashion. So we built what we call an orchestrator. This is where the IO is handled. So all of the interfacing towards the networking is done right there. And it at the same time acts like a load balancer in which we can identify what we call a security group. So the security group maps together a bunch of physical appliances that act as one, and the load balancer distributes the traffic across. The interesting thing here as well is that we can have multiple security groups as part of such a solution. So if you have, as an example, 10 devices, you could have 4 sitting in one security group and 4 sitting in another security group. If the load increases above a certain threshold, we could dynamically even add the appliance that you have on a standby into the security group as you see fit. So in this, you can see you can scale as the need is introduced and do it in a very dynamic fashion. So this is what we call hyperscaling.
Thank you. Okay, I think that's Peter, if you want to just come to the side, we've got our email addresses. Just so if anyone wants to take note of that. And of course, when we send through the presentation, that will be there. I think, we've got to make I don't know if Akinola, you want to just share some final words, but at least from my side, I really, again, like I said at the beginning, I really want to thank DigiConnect for being a phenomenal partner and working with us to put this on. Thank you so, so much. I want to thank all of you for attending today and for giving us your time. But most importantly, we need to thank Peter for a fantastic presentation and engaging content. You can, of course, be in touch with us through those email addresses, but you will receive the presentation from DigiConnect. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you, Jeremy, and thank you, Peter, for the wonderful transition and flow for the presentation, and thanks for also bringing in the questions as well. I want to thank all our attendees, and we would not like to keep you any longer. We will get in touch with some of the presentation as Jeremy mentioned, and if you would like to have more conversation with the team from Checkpoint, we'll be happy to share the contact with you. Thank you, everyone, and looking forward to future opportunities to have you to keep this conversation forward and keep it going. Thanks. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks. Have a great
day.
Bye
now. Thank you.
Yeah, bye.
Goodbye.